We've already spoken a lot about incorporating research into our various creative nonfiction pieces. And I've asked you to read the excerpt from Tell It Slant that specifically delves deeper into incorporating various forms of research into your pieces. So I'm not going to belabor the point. Rather, I thought that I would share a short excerpt from my memoir that shows how, in this particular case, I chose to incorporate an interview very directly into the text. Now, this is not the kind of approach that I always take. This is a approach. Often I will incorporate details from an interview more seamlessly. So I might incorporate a color or, the texture of the hardwood on the floor or the color of a character's hair. But in this excerpt from my memoir, I've incorporated the interview directly into the text. Now, this is still a rough draft, so there will be further drafts, but I hope that it will give you an idea of the techniques that I've used. So just to give you a bit of background on this so that it makes sense, my uncle Brent and my father were very close. They worked together for the Department of Highways for BC on various portions of the Yellowhead Highway. And during the time of this particular scene where what Brent's talking about here, they were working on the section that goes right past my family's home. And they were on separate survey crews, but they were working at the same time. So you'll notice that I deliberately juxtapose Brent's interpretation with this sense of uncertainty or discovery of what the actual truth might be. Later on in the memoir, I include excerpts from Bob's letters that show that his take on their relationship might have been very different than Brent's current take on their relationship. So there is that tension that gets built up that way. I'm not going to go that far into the memoir. I'm just going to show you this one portion, but just so you have a broader perspective. So here we go. The survey crew was working on route location, taking cross-sections of the topography by calculating elevations and measurements of the sections from the center of the new Yellowhead Highway. Brent and Bob were on different teams, but they had the same job, to hold the tape and rod while their partners held the hand level and the other end of the tape measure and recorded the measurements. It became a competition between Brent's and Bob's teams to see who could take elevations the quickest. Nothing stopped us, not thick brush. If that was the way we were supposed to go, we went. We never cheated. When Brent speaks about my father, I hear the admiration in his voice. He'd barrel through, head down, shoulders up. Until they started on the crew, the project was behind on that phase of the work. They started west of Red Pass, which then still held a small railway station, a general store, and several homes. Although the school, where for several years Mary had studied, was closed and would never open again. From Red Pass, they surveyed up to the BC-Alberta border. He was well liked whenever I worked with him, said Brent. But there is gravel at the bottom of Brent's voice, as though the words come uneasily. After Grandma died, my mother's sister Anita took over the lease on the house at Lucerne. That's where we are now, sitting on white plastic stackable lawn chairs by the front porch as we talk. When Brent tells me that Bob pitched his tent in the yard, he gestures to the spot, and a ghost flickers past. The sun is warm on this bright spring day. Ruby-throated hummingbirds swarm the feeders. Their iridescent flashes light the air as they dive and buzz like miniature fighter pilots, willing to battle for every droplet of nectar. Brent wants me to believe that my father was well liked, and I believe this to be true, but Brent seems to try too hard. Bob had a sunny disposition, he tells me. That's what came across in public. I guess he had his moods, and maybe he had his reasons for his moods. I want to tell Brent that there was another side to my father, a side that my mother didn't want to marry. It's not that I don't believe him, but we cannot know the inner workings of any relationship, and I've read my father's letters. Apart from my mother, I'm the only one who has. Bob loved Mary, and for a time Mary loved Bob, but these affections were only the covers of the book. There's the whole story in between.